Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Paladin Brooks Smarter Sport and Entertainment podcast. My name is Hannah Brooks. It's nice to see you all again. And I'm the co-founder of Paladin Brooks alongside Tony. Tony is here with me. You will be glad to know. Tony, welcome.
Thanks, Hannah. Hope you're having a good day so far.
I am. I got the name of the podcast right, so I'm pretty chuffed about that.
Well done. It's still early days.
So, where do we start with this one? Because this is quite an interesting podcast. I suppose I need to introduce it first and foremost. So, sponsorship, is it broken? And did 2025 break it? Because I don't know about you, but it got real hard for a lot of people in sponsorship.
To be frank, in 2025, I don't think sponsorship purely drifted off course. I think 2025 broke it structurally, economically, politically, and technologically, and for a number of reasons. So I think it's a pretty good place to start to discuss, because a lot of people watching this are sitting back going, what was that? What just happened? Ourselves included to a degree. And I think towards the end of the year, everyone with that realization is only just starting to normalize now and doing an autopsy as to what all happened in the last 12 months.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I feel like I've learned a lot this year about what works, what doesn't work, and also how it's evolving. And I think the age of old sponsorship is over, quite frankly. And I think, we're reading the room, brands are reading the room, C-suite execs are reading the room, and we're all just it's like a Mexican standoff right now. We're all just trying to read the room and understand what direction to take this now. So I guess, what do you see the real key points going into 2026 being?
So I think, towards the end of last year, so in 2024, we knew that it wasn't just slapping a logo on a sleeve or having some passive signage and hoping for the best. We knew it wasn't going to be a sports property sitting there with open hands, just receiving money just for a little bit of visibility. Already we knew that. I think what compounded 2025 significantly was just the immense acceleration of artificial intelligence. We knew it was a thing in 2022. It evolved in 2023. It started becoming impactful in 2024, and this year it's just been off the charts. Now, what effectively has happened is that a lot of content has changed, for starters, and the way brands actually integrate with sports has needed to change. So I think as things have become more and more artificial, I think the world is becoming more and more allergic to things that are artificial and superficial and are looking more for a humanized element. So the sponsorships, and as you know, I don't particularly like calling them sponsorships, and I think the word is actually pretty much is going to die along with 2025, that it's more of a partnership and a relationship. So this is where brands and rights holders, I think what want to need to be a lot more interconnected, that customers or consumers really truly experience the sport or immersed in the sport, really get a good understanding, and I think that benefits both parties. So on the back end of all of the AI acceleration, I also think politically there was a big shift early on in 2025 with all the tariff impositions that happened globally. So that was a bit of an economic slap in the face for many cross-border partnerships, and a lot of CFOs literally just standing back and going, whoa, hang on a second. We need to be very, very careful where we put our money. So I think those two elements intertwined resulted in your Mexican standoff. Everyone froze, during the headlights, just going, okay, cool. So what are we going to do now? And I think only at this point, I guess it's a bit like playing chicken, really. Like someone's got to make a move. And I kind of think that's where we're getting to in 2026. And frankly speaking, I think a lot of people who still have got a legacy mindset of slapping logos on shirts are going to be very, very horribly surprised and disappointed if they continue with that strategy.
So that's a great point. So where do you think the power lies now? Brand or asset?
Well, I'm obviously and diplomatically going to say both. Where I think where the power has historically lay is with the brand because they effectively are the ones controlling the purse strings. Um, but I think where the power shift is starting to happen, and very much so with regards to how partnerships are viewed. I think rights holders or assets or sports properties or whatever you want to call them need to start realizing that they've got a lot more power because partnerships aren't only about winning and performance. I think a historical mindset was, okay, I'm a brand, I'm going to come along, I just want to sponsor the best, therefore I'm going to be most visible. As long as my logo is seen on the podium, then we A for A. And it's not so much working like that anymore. Where things are really going is more in the experiential component and storytelling. So I think that sports properties that can really tell a good story and really make their experience more authentic, I think that holds a lot of power, and that's not monetary power. That's authenticity power. And I think when brands start to realize that, where you're going to start seeing the drift in terms of where brands spend their money, and I'm going to put this one out there. It's not going to be, and it shouldn't be about the money. Is where they're going to put their energy, their legacy, and their authenticity in integrating into that storytelling narrative. And I think this is why I want to ban the word sponsorship and call it a partnership. And I think as we evolve, even partnership is going to start dying off, and it's going to become more of a relationship. So effectively, bottom line is you're asking, who's got more power, the husband or the wife? Both.
Yeah. No, it's a great point, and it takes both sides to understand their role. Though that's where I see the issue being is that brands will expect that the rights holders and sports properties will do more of the work for them to prove their money and where it's being spent. But I do think it's not always going to be the case. I think you have to take responsibility on both sides, and I think having someone in a brand who understands how sport works and maybe the potential of sport is really key. And I think, you've got your CMOs, you've got all those kind of people, but I don't think the power really lays with them anymore. I think it's actually the CFO who has the most understanding of where that money goes and the impact it's going to have. Because no one cares, like you say, about the logo. No one cares about that kind of eyeballs thing on a logo. It's dead weight to a CFO. So we need to understand how to navigate CFO language as much as we need to understand a CMO's language now. And that's going to be a new 2026 thing. I mean, obviously, we can deal with both people. We deal with all these people anyway, but I think for sports properties to justify what they're doing, that will be a really interesting curveball this coming year.
Yeah, so I think the tricky part with that, obviously, is that people within an organization who truly understand sport or have a very intimate relationship with sport didn't necessarily study finance. They generally were involved more. There were other sports people themselves, or they studied sport. Generally, you find that your top level decision makers, especially at a financial level, like your CFO, will come very much from a financial background, and although they will enjoy to watch sport a lot, I'm not always sure that the message gets effectively relayed up to that level as well as it could. And I think this sits on the brand. So, smart companies that have either got people embedded within the company who understand the true ecosystem of sport, who can take that and translate it into a language that the CFO can understand, that they would eventually sign off on what could potentially be a good investment, or come to the realization that they need to be working with people like ourselves who can effectively do that translation for them. Because the position that we sit in is that we know the world of sport very well. We also know how sport behaves. I think what we also understand, and I feel a lot of brands potentially lack within their ecosystem is also understanding the hierarchical structures in how a sports organization is run. I think it's often a broad sweeping assumption that the C-suite down to the VP, down to senior management, the way a typical company is structured is mirrored in sport. And as I've discussed in previous podcasts, is that's not always the case. Often sports organizations are called sports disorganizations for a reason, is that they generally don't quite always know what they're doing from a hierarchical structure. They're really good at their sport and they're potentially really good at marketing it. But when it comes to actually monetizing it, I think that's where the gap lies. And I do agree fully that I think that the power of creating successful partnerships in the future, or the ultimate sign-off, does need to sit more with the CFO, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to be looking at or needing to report back on the bottom line. So as much as sports sponsorship can historically have been seen as largely a marketing exercise, I think as we move into 2026, it becomes more of a relational and an investment exercise. And I think that's where the subtle shift is going to start happening, or going to need to start happening within brands. And brands who note that are possibly going to be the ones who are going to choose the smarter partnerships.
Yeah. Yeah, great point. That's a really great point. So I'm going to change the direction slightly. So from a kind of sports property perspective, for those who don't necessarily work with people like us and do a lot of their own outreach and have like commercial teams that kind of will go out and find things, you briefly mentioned AI earlier. They will be using a lot of AI to try and find the right people in brands to speak to, right? So that's dangerous right now, because I feel the reason that they're doing that is A, because they're desperate for that money, B, because they don't have a relationship there already, and C, because they think it's a shortcut and they'll get ahead of the curve, basically. So I don't see any of those points being a good reason. And I personally would kind of just gently advise against that strategy, but I want to know what your thoughts are.
I need to choose my words very carefully.
Yeah.
So I've got a reasonably large amount of experience in AI. I think one observation that needs to be made is that AI generally, depending on which GPT model you use, is largely agreeable. So generally, it doesn't argue with you. It does when you hit certain guardrails, like that are hard stops and hard no's. It'll apply some form of critical thinking. But generally, and I implore anyone to actually test this, is go and ask a question and try and force your agenda a little bit, and generally you'll get the AI to agree with you. So that's the first problem. Second problem, which is possibly even the bigger one, is that artificial intelligence, for lack of a better definition, is really the aggregate of general stupidity. So what that basically means, it just self perpetuates an ongoing narrative that has been planted since the seed of, say, before even Google. When the internet was first invented, when critical thinking was applied and people actually used their brains to write articles and to basically put down doctrine and philosophy, those are the core principles. And I think bringing this back to sponsorships, and I use the word sponsorships strategically here, is that those seeds have all been kind of planted. Now, what AI tends to do is it takes that and it just recirculates it, and then makes its own assumptions of bad assumptions, and then makes more assumptions of worse assumptions. And what you end up finding is a very vanilla mix of choice. So if you had to take the ice cream I had last night, that was a combination of, I think it was caramel, vanilla, and chocolate. Effectively, what AI does is just takes a warm spoon and takes in, then just mixes it all around, and you just get this like sort of light brown mulch. And that is basically what many people and brands are potentially expecting AI to do is to dish them up this very fancy dish. But at the end of the day, you're going to get very, I'd say, average generic advice from AI. My second point on this is that AI would also be more potentially primed to pick out what's in the news. So your properties or your stories that are already hot are going to be the ones that are going to be chosen, and the relational components, i.e., speaking to actual human beings and networking the good old-fashioned way, kind of gets neglected. So often you'll find there are so many diamonds in the rough that are staying in the rough, and the ones that are overpriced and polished just keep driving extortionate market value up. So the net effect basically means is that brands are paying more for less at the end of the day, and properties that have potentially got an immense amount of storytelling value are getting overlooked. And I can blame that quite squarely on AI and the lack of authenticity that's utilized and critical thinking. Sorry to be that blunt.
You blunt?
Never.
Never
As a
heard of that before. No, you're right, and I think you know, people are using AI to find people, but you're right. It's only going to be the stuff that's already there that you could go and look for yourself in the news. It's only going to be the most recent bit of information. It's not going to be the naturally occurring understanding of the intricate partnerships and relationships that are inside a brand, that comes with asking those questions of a brand and trying to understand their ecosystem before slapping them with a massive pitch deck. It won't work because you're already on the back foot. You're already saying to James, who's last been known as a CFO, here's this massive ask of £1.5 million, but I have no idea who else I should speak to. I've just come to you and I have that's whatever. But for like me and you, I think when we spend time with a brand and we learn about how they work, we learn about the rest of the team, we learn about all of the stakeholders, and we spend time understanding that structure, because we know that it's not just going to be the CFO involved. It's going to be all the way down to like an officer level that's going to be deploying activation strategy and all of that. And it's working with all of those people to get sign off, and that's something I think that is starting at least to be lost and needs to be remembered going into 2026.
Look, big time. I think at the end of the day, a simple agreement can be made. I mean, once you've signed the contract, you sign the contract. And the contract can be mostly adhered to, but where I think it's vitally important, and I mean, this is honestly what both you and I spend a lot of our day doing, is really like listening to the wants and the needs of both parties and all parties. At the end of the day, a sports property or a sports asset, I mean, they've got a need. They've got multiple needs. A, they want to be good. B, they need money to be like self-sustaining. C, they've got a story they want to tell. They've got a legacy they want to build. They've got a reputation, credibility, all of that type of stuff. If you flip it around to like what a brand's wants and needs are, their basic existence, they're a business. They are there. They need to be making a profit. So there needs to be like money actually getting made. They've also got a reputation to protect. So a lot of the needs and the wants are fairly similar. They're just made in different ways. And I think, translating in between the two and being able to sit and listen specifically, okay, the brand is needing and wanting A, B, C. The sports property is needing and wanting X, Y, Z. How do we get those to meet in the middle? And there's obviously going to be, and this is obviously the slightly more difficult part of my days, is there's going to be pushback on both sides. So often being piggy in the middle here, you have to give pushback to either a brand with an over expectation or a sports asset with an unrealistic want. And also the other thing that makes it a bit more difficult is when you're speaking to both parties, trying to get enough information out of both of them to build the bigger ecosystem. Because sometimes it's just like a sports property saying, okay, cool, we need to make this event happen. We need X amount of money, and that's it. but there's not much that comes with it in terms of what's it going to look like. What does the activation look like? What is the activation plan? What's the site map? What's the social media reach? What's the in-person reach going to be like? What's the 5-year play roadmap like? What's all of that? Because that's the first question a brand that you go to is going to ask. They're going to say, okay, cool, we got your vision, but how does this serve us? And I think then it's extracting the information on both sides to create that holistic picture. So it's not just a one-sided pitch deck that gets slapped in someone's face. It's actually having a really intimate understanding of the wants and the needs of both parties and then mediating that to make sure it happens. And this, I think, going back to looking at 2025, where things have become quite not inhuman, it's because it's been so generally so vanilla and AI driven, authenticity got completely lost. So you got brand and you got sports property busy sitting like that, whereas actually by humanizing it, it looks more like that. And this is a very human process and needs to be carefully curated, especially if you look at a partnership's life cycle, because in year one, things might or might not happen. It's only really year 2, 3, and 4 where the real magic starts happening. And if you're lucky enough to get a renewal in year 5, that's when like real partnerships really start flourishing into true relationships and brands start becoming synonymous with that particular sport.
Can I put it better myself? Yeah, I think, yeah. So, okay, I'm very aware of the time, Tony. I know we could talk about 2025 for a lot longer, and maybe we will
No,
at some
thank you.
point.
No, thank you. Let's not speak about 2025 anymore. Very
Um,
happy. It is the 29th today. I'd be very
yes.
happy to tuck 2025 in us and put it to sleep
Yeah.
and just
Okay.
let it.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, I'm behind you on that one. So I guess let's have three takeaways then from this, because I think one, relationships have been lost. You know, like relationships have been lost on both sides of the coin here. And I think two, audience led, reaching kind of sponsorships in the old term. I think they're dead in the water now. I don't think anyone really cares about just the reach. I think storytelling is probably going to be the new way forward. When you look back, the successful ones were storytelling, and maybe I think the third point, yeah, I think what you just said kind of encapsulates it all. Really, would you agree? Or
Yeah, I mean the real question I've got, and I'd love to hear some comments on this, is for a either sports property or a brand, is it better to have one trusted partner or 10 logo placements? And this is a really interesting one because a lot of the time I feel that in terms of having logo replacements, those type of partnerships are purely sponsorships. They knee-jerk reactions, and a lot of trust and credibility get burnt along the way. However, the flip side and what needs to be considered is that to find that one trusted partner takes time and curation, and often I find that impatience gets in the way, or the necessity to have income almost immediately sometimes rushes those decisions, and you end up with a lot of logo replacements happening all in a short space of time, which increases the amount of load of relationships to manage and the amount of things to go wrong. And I'm curious to know what certain brands feel about that. I'm not going to mention examples because there are a number that literally change their brands or their sponsors like they change their underwear, and it doesn't really carry the best story. But that's just my humble observation. But I'd be curious to know about what people think about that.
yeah, well, people get in touch. Get in touch. Let us know what you think, because, or if you want to come on and challenge Tony's narrative there, also let us know, because I think I'd love to be in that room. No, I think that's been a really great interview there, Tony. Thank you so much. And yeah, that's us done, folks. Episode, what will this be? 2 now. episode
Yeah.
2 in the books. So thank you very much, and we will see you all shortly.
Yeah. And here's to many more. Thanks, Hannah. Hannah, have a great day, and I will chat to you soon. Cool. Cheers.
Edit this out.
Is it out?
Yeah.
You know I'm going to leave it in, right?
Oh, you do what you need to do. I'm sorry. So I had a dog bark. I had the postman knocking at the window.